Hello everybody. I know everybody that's ready to get this election over with, ready to move forward. And I know a lot of you came because y'all want to hear who's on the ballot. Y'all want to hear what policies they have, where they stand. And we going to get to the analysis of all that. But first, we going to do a series called Understanding America. Don't go nowhere. Keep it live. So some of you been contacting me, and I've been also getting reports that some of you really don't understand politics and government. And some of you, it might be your first time voting, and people are really looking for knowledge so they can make a very informed decision about who they choosing to be their governor or their senator or their representative. And I tell you, you in the right place. That is what Noesis is all about. Informing you, giving you the game, giving you the information so you can make informed decisions and have the knowledge so you can grow, so you can unplug and go forth and prosper. So we're going to be discussing a few things like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Electoral College, and also we're going to be breaking down the ideology behind the major political parties. But before we get into that, can you hit the like button because it really helps out my channel? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it. So we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to start at the 12 colonies where everything started. Roll the film.
But it began as 13 small colonies. It all started with Virginia, when wealthy London businessmen asked the British king to set up shop in what was known as the New World. 104 British colonists settled at Jamestown, forming the first permanent American colony. Next up, Massachusetts, founded after being established by the Pilgrims, who sailed the Mayflower to Plymouth.
As you can see, America did not start off as a country. America started off as 13 colonies under the British rule of the king. And why they came over here to this new land, or new world as they call it, they came for freedom. Whether it was for religious freedom or economic freedom, they came for freedom. And I want y'all to remember that as we go through this series. Next up, we're going to be talking about the American Revolution. How the 13 colonies fought and won for their freedom from the British king. Roll the film.
And they were not just brave in a military sense, they were intellectually brave.
The people who were in the forefront of the revolution were people engaged in commerce because they felt most specifically and directly British interference, British taxation and limitations.
So to give a little background of the causes of the American Revolution, Great Britain had just got out of a war. I believe it was called the 7 Years' War, and it was very expensive. So what he did, he decided to tax the colonies to help cover the expenses for the war. And he had taxes on paper, he had taxes on tea, and I tell you, them colonies, they love their tea. And it was strife and conflict, but became and grew between the king and the colonies. And the king, he sent over soldiers to keep the colonies in check. And that caused even more strife because the king had forced the colonies to house these soldiers. So these soldiers are supposed to watch them, and they got to feed them and clothe them on their own dime, on their own ticket. So this just caused more strife. And it got to the point where the colonies, they started to rise up real big time. And they had an event called the Boston Tea Party, where they on the ship, they just throwing over the tea. They throwing out all the tea. They just fed up with the king. So this escalated, and eventually it was delegates from each of the 13 colonies, well, most of the 13 colonies, they came together and they decided to make a declaration of independence And one famous line is that they said is give me liberty or give me death. And they said they claim was why they was declaring independence was because the king was taxing them, but they didn't have no representation in Britain. The king was taxing them heavily, but he was treating them like second-hand citizens. So, hey, that's why in America today, everybody that's taxed, they get the right to vote, and they get the right to participate in the political sphere. And that is why the American Revolution started. Give me liberty or give me death. That's what they were saying.
It's very interesting to think about the foundation of the nation and the fact that the country was born out of revolution, and that sort of rallying spirit of win, win, win and fight back the oppressors persists.
We were effectively guerrilla fighters. We were not the Redcoats, after all.
The American Revolution, in one sense, is an example of a war in which the weaker contestant prevails because it is more determined to persevere.
It's almost the little man syndrome. We've always felt a little undersized, a little underappreciated, and I think whenever you're able to take those feelings and manifest them and to try to do something that's positive, to try to do something that's competitive, you give yourself a lot better chance of being successful.
So you heard the term guerrilla warfare, and you heard the term redcoat, and you also wondering how in the world did this small force from 13 colonies beat a whole country backed by a strong king? It goes back to give me liberty or give me death. These men were fighting for their beliefs. These men were fighting for themselves and their families, and they was fighting. They was passionate about what they was fighting for, and they also knew they couldn't beat this big army according to normal means. So they used guerrilla tactics. Where they'd come ambush the redcoats, which was the British Army. They always wore this big flashy red coats, and the Americans, they would come and ambush them and hit them from the side, hit them from the right side, hit them from the left side, and just kill a couple people and run out. You know, and they kept doing it and ambush them, run out, ambush them and run out. And this worked because the British Army, they were a very formal army. They would come marching in real stiff and had they little, like they on a parade or something, and they had these big flashy coats where even in the dark you could see these red coats. And they wasn't used to the terrain of America, and they wasn't used to the fighting style. So they were very arrogant, and they also feel like, oh, this probably gonna be easy, man. We just gonna destroy these people, take the land back, and we gonna get them under control. They didn't count on the Americans to be so creative in their battle tactics. They didn't count on the Americans to have so much passion and heart to win, and they didn't count on these things. And this would cause them slowly to get beat, because they was fighting. They was basically bringing the knife to a gunfight. Even though they had more people, the Americans had the terrain. The Americans had superior generals. The Americans had the more heart, because when you fighting for an unjust king, you might be getting paid as a soldier, but your heart really not into it. But the Americans, they was fighting for their lives. They was fighting for a land. They was fighting for their dreams and hopes and ideals. And the Redcoats was nothing but paid soldiers.
The British Army was fighting for a king. The Americans were fighting for their lives. And it's not so much how much equipment you have or how much training you have. It's what's in your belly. It's what's in your heart. And you know you're fighting for your lives in a way of life, as opposed to fighting for a monarch who you may not care about or may not love, but it's your job That's all the difference. You're going to fight harder if you're fighting for your own way of life, you're fighting for your family.
So the colonies did it. They came together. They fought hard. They fought with bravery. They fought with honor. And they beat the king. And they won their independence. So that's all I got for y'all today. And hey, please hit the like button because it really helps my channel. And please come back for this series, Understanding America. But before we go, we're going to do a quick review. The people came over here to this land called the New World for freedom, religious freedom, and economic freedom. And the colonies rebelled against Britain because they didn't have representation, taxation without representation. And hey, remember to unplug and prosper. Y'all have a blessed day.